Ici le podcast Stack Exchange, Hamilton de New York. Ici l'épisode numéro 23. Aujourd'hui, nous avons dans le studio David Fullerton. Il est le directeur de la technologie par intérim. Bonjour, David. David, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Yeah, et passant ses vacances à El Cerrito, Californie, Jeff Atwood nous joint par Skype. He's on vacation. Yeah, hello, Jeff.
Oui.
Hello. Are you for scuba? Are you guys for scuba? Yes, vacation?
Oui.
Okay, also with us today, very special guest, James Portnow, is co-creator of Extra Credits on Penny Arcade TV. Et moi, je suis George Polsky, votre animateur. Bonjour. That is all the French I know. That's it. You've used every word.
Was that actually French?
French from my vocabulary. I knew that we never do introductions because we always do the cold start, hot start, warm start thing. So I thought one day I would.
Technically, you talking in French is a hot start.
That's right.
That is a pretty hot start.
And I can use the accent much better than.
So let's talk about our guests. Let's get right to our guests. So let's talk about the circumstances that actually brought you to our podcast. We are all very excited about this because we're big fans of the show Extra Credits, which is where James is. That's how we know James, although he's done other things in his life than that.
Co-creator.
Yes, co-creator of the Extra Credit show. And how long has the Extra Credit show gone on now? How long has it been a thing,
So
James?
just checking. Are we live?
Yes, I think we are.
All
Well,
right.
we're sort of live. There's only like
live.
200 people watching us, but there'll be thousands and thousands of people listening to the recording of this tomorrow.
All right, fantastic. I'm glad
Yeah.
the first thing I did was ask if we were live.
Yeah.
All
We are
right.
definitely live.
So, what was the question?
How long has Extra Credits been a thing?
So really, it's been a thing for a couple of years now. We started way back when I was working at Activision. I remember I was sitting there during lunch checking my email, and I got this email from this kid over at Savannah Art and Design, and he was doing a video presentation for his kind of final project about some game design stuff, and he asked me how you pronounce your name, because he wanted to get it right because he'd used one of my articles for a large section of his presentation.
Cool.
And so, of course, I told him, I was like, hey, I would love to see it. Shoot it my way when you're done. And he did, and for years I had been writing for Gamma Sutra and Edge and all these industry-facing magazines, but I had wanted to expand out because us talking in that closed bubble, while it has some value, has nowhere near the value of opening up a conversation to the consumer. But I never really known how to reach the consumer, especially with some of these higher-level design concepts. And as soon as I saw this video, I was like, there it is, that's it. And so he then asked if he could use some more of my articles. I was like, yeah, of course, go ahead, take anything. Just run with it. You don't even have to ask.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple articles down the line, I was like, you know what? How about I just start writing for you? And that was Extra Credits.
That's awesome. And the show is great. It's currently, you guys changed hosts. You're now at Penny Arcade, which is a pretty nice place to be, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the number one coolest
Yeah.
gaming place that anybody has ever been to, ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that ended up well for you guys. Like, I think you ended up sort of in a better place than you were. Nothing's wrong with The Escapist, but, I mean, I think Penny Arcade is pretty synonymous with, gaming to me in a way that The Escapist really never was.
Penny Arcade is great, and in a lot of ways they do a lot of really good things. We're big fans of Child's Play, all that sort of thing. And so, yeah, it's been a great place for us to land.
Yeah. So go to penny-arcade.com/PATV/show/extra credits. And I actually I'm actually have that open in my browser because in preparation for the show, I had actually seen one of your shows because I'll tell you who's a big fan of your show is our designer, Jin Yang, also another avid gamer. And he had sent me a link to the show you did about the myth of the gun.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that was a neat show because what it was about was highlighting sort of the Japanese viewpoint of what the gun is, and then sort of the Western view of what the gun is. And when you think Western view of what the gun is, you think Doom and Quake and all these games. But it was really interesting to consider sort of the sociological basis for how the Japanese looked at this was that, they were the gun, like the body, the person is the gun, whereas the Western view is the gun is just an object that you pick up that gives you these special powers. That was fascinating to me, and I really appreciated that, and that it was a good introduction to sort of the, I want to say almost literary way that you guys you analyze things, and it was really deep, much deeper than I expected it to be. I was like, oh, another gaming video thing, I wasn't really expecting much, but it was quite good. And all their shows are really quite good and have the same sort of thought process going into them, and they're really interesting. Now, in preparation for the show, I had some quotes I wanted to feed you from some of the episodes. I tried to focus on what we do at Stack Exchange, and I think the overlap from what you do and what we do is that we're essentially trying to make learning fun. I mean, it's a very, very broad conceptualization of what we're doing, but you take all these sort of expert specialized topics, we create a website per topic, like for programming that would be Stack Overflow, and we have these incentive systems in place to encourage people to do things that help others learn and also help themselves learn. And sort of get us out of this classic forum mindset, which have all these pitfalls that I won't go into, and into a more higher signal-to-noise Q&A. So all the gamification stuff that we've been doing is really in service of that learning goal. We don't really say it that way, but that's kind of what we do. So the shows that I looked at, and the last one that I looked at was the one about game addiction, which I know is very, a topic that's very close to you. And I really enjoyed that one, but I want to focus on two quotes there. One was the idea that you're missing important moments. Like that, there's when you spend time on Stack Overflow, you're learning. You're learning how to be a better programmer. You're learning how to be a better communicator. That time doesn't really dissipate. As you said, you get up from the couch and you've played Halo, and like, what have you really accomplished? Like, what do you have to show for that time that you spent playing Halo? And the answer is really not a lot. But when you get up from a Stack Overflow session, it's like, wow, I learned a few things about programming, and I learned sort of how to communicate with my fellow programmers in a way that they can understand. But there's still an addictive nature to it. Like, we do have people that complain, and multiple times actually on Meta Stack Overflow, which is our site about the site, that they're spending too much time on Stack Overflow. They've kind of stopped programming and they're actually playing the Stack Overflow game for the points. And we actually have a cap on the number of points you can get per day, called the daily reputation cap, and people give us so much crap about this. They're like, why is there a cap? And I'm like, look, the cap is there for your protection. Do you understand? Like, we don't want you to spend all your time on Stack Overflow. That's not the point of this thing that we're doing. And this brings me to missing the important moments. You're missing the important moments of your career. Like, you should be writing code at your place of employment with the programmers that you work with. That's the point of Stack Overflow. That really spoke to me was, you got to really think, like, gaming is fun, but like at the point where like you're missing important things, that to me was sort of the crux of, the addiction story that you had, was like, that's the thing you want to watch out for.
And it's amazing. I don't know if did you get to see the Skinner Box episode?
I did. That's on my list. I watched that one as well.
Because I was going to say the power of that is undeniable, and even what you guys do in Stack Exchange, I mean, I think it's really great that you do actually put that cap there, because that's something that we often don't do in games, but that's the Skinner Box. Wherever you find it, I mean, it's the same reason that we find slot machines addictive, right? Even though they're the worst game out there. And so one does have to be cognizant. On the other side, I mean, I think it's great. I think the fact that you guys are getting people to voluntarily sort of be teachers and to reach out to the community is a fantastic thing. And I do think that Stack Exchange sort of promotes this broadening of the base that's able to program and understand the way we're going to interface with the future, right? At this point, this basic machine understanding is something that is a core 21st century skill, and you've got a way to take the first steps that are fun, right? And get very deep into it. But I think that's great.
Yeah, and since you brought up the Skinner Box, I actually have in my notes the 6 things that you brought up that make sort of so Skinner Box, the classic Skinner Box, is the pigeon pressing a button to get food, and it gets an intermittent reward. You don't always press the button and get food, because that doesn't actually work very well. But what works brilliantly is like every n times, where n is a random number, you get a food pellet for pressing the button. That's the Skinner Box, and you outlined 6 rules or 6 guidelines that help, do it in an ethical way, where you're creating a Skinner Box with the goal of like something positive on the other side of the Skinner Box, not just I got a pellet of food for pressing a button, but hey, I learned something, or I taught something to someone else. And it was interesting because I think a lot of these do apply to what we do on Stack Exchange. One was mystery. You're sort of discovering stuff. And this has always been my classic argument. Like, people complain to us, like, I don't understand why I get these badges. Our achievement system is called badges. And I had to explain to people, it's like, look, this is supposed to be a little mysterious. You're supposed to look at this badge and think, how do I get this? Why do I get this? Why is this here? What is this for? Like, that's part of the mission. And I feel like a lot of what I do is like resisting the community's impulse to turn this into a very strong Skinner box. Like, they're like, oh, no, your Skinner box is not good enough. It needs to be even stronger, right? That's a good example of that. Like, I'm trying to retain the mystery of, like, gee, the badge is supposed to be something you discover. Like, how does this work? Why would we even have this, right? Like, what's the point of this? You're supposed to think about that. It's not supposed to be do this X times and get this reward. Mastery was the next item on the list. I think programming is synonymous with this idea of trying to master the box, the universe inside your computer. The concept of mastery is a very, very strong one that goes really deep, particularly with programmers. Mental challenge, I think that also was on your list. That's, I think, synonymous with the mastery. Narrative, I don't know if there's a narrative in programming, but the narrative was good because in gaming there's obviously a story. I don't know what the story would be on Stack Exchange.
Well, there's a narrative inherent in community, right? You get a group of people together, you instantly generate a narrative. It's what we call the campfire narrative, right? That it may not be a narrative inherent in the activity itself, but rather in the interaction of human beings doing that activity.
That's a really good point, because that's one of the big mistakes we made early on. People always ask, like, what's your biggest mistake? And usually it's a bullshit question, but in this case, our biggest mistake by far, early on when we just had Stack Overflow, we didn't have the Stack Exchange engine as such, was that I denied the need for a site about the site, like a place where people would go to talk about the site itself. Because I was like, okay, we don't need that. Just stick to the programming. We don't need to discuss the rules of Stack Overflow. We don't need to, have all these pointless discussions. And that just doesn't work. And I think maybe it was people trying to find that narrative, like, why are we here? Like, what is this for? Who are these other people? Why are we all doing this? And that's maybe a really good argument for that's the campfire. Like, meta is the campfire for Stack Overflow. It's the place you go when it's not necessarily programming. It's like, did you see that answer that guy wrote? That was really crazy. Or, some other kind of meta commentary that we are pretty strict with on the main site. We don't want to mix our chocolate and peanut butter in that, we want really strong content on the main site and keep all the campfire stuff sort of. It's kind of like Wikipedia does with their talk pages, although in a much, I think, friendlier way than that. If you just want the information, you go to the Wikipedia page. If you want the politics of, like, why does this page look the way it looks, and who had input into this page, then you go to the talk page. And maybe that's a similar narrative story for Wikipedia. Novelty, I think that's a great one. Always discovering something new, and I think programming is the discovery of everything changing every 5 years anyway. So that's sort of endemic to the field, I think. And then flow. Flow, I think, is very the used example of, like, say, Rock Band, where you're learning these note patterns, and then eventually you're playing the note patterns without. You're not conscious that you're processing the note patterns. You're just playing them without, like, it's filtering all the way through your brain to your fingers really, really, really rapidly, and that's flow in a game. But the concept of flow is a very common programmer concept as well. That you're writing the code and you sort of become the code. You're not thinking about it. You're just kind of doing it, and you're not interrupted. Like, Joel has a great set of articles where he talks about one of the most dangerous things for a programmer is this concept of being interrupted all the time, which is how managers work. They're in a state of constant interruption, but for a programmer, that's death. That completely ruins any flow you would have. And I was amazed. Almost all the concepts you listed, I thought, had a really strong map to what we're trying to do on Stack Exchange, and in particular with programming. Because honestly, we have a techie bent. I mean, if you go to stackexchange.com, you're going to see a lot of sites that are very, very technical. You're not going to see a lot of soft subjects there.
Although I actually just saw you guys are doing a bunch of game sites, yeah?
We do have a site for gamers, a broad site for gamers, and a game developer site, but that would be technical as well.
Well, I mean, I just wanted to. I actually was unaware of those sites until relatively recently, and I feel like it's a great place. We get questions all the time about how to begin, how to step into the realm of game development, and so I just kind of wanted to give you guys a shout out and be like, hey, here's the place.
Oh, definitely. And, let me talk a little bit about the striation between, so there's Stack Overflow, which is a site for programmers, and then there's Game Dev, which is a site for game developers. And you might ask, well, why have two sites? This is another thing that comes up all the time. And to use a gaming metaphor, it's like having alts, right? You play a game, you don't just have one character, you have 5 characters. And I think people have sort of multifaceted identities. It's not like you have your one Facebook page and that's you forever. That's your single point of reference for the entire internet. I find that having these alts, if you will, better reflects the reality. And I think for a game developer, the way we draw the line in the sand is if you're a game developer, it's a much more holistic thing that you're doing. You have to think about art creation. You have to think about music in a way that you didn't. As if you're writing a database app, what are you going to do with music? You have to think about just platform delivery, graphics in a way that you didn't before. Business, right? Like how are you going to get this in the hands of gamers? Right? That's a much more businessy thing than the average line of business app. To me, it's a very different community. And having a separate site says, look, you have your own community, where you can cover all this stuff. This is all on topic for you.
I wish we could even make it somewhat more granular, right? Like, I mean, it's great that you guys have the game development, but you're right. Each of those things is almost its own thing, right? Like your design questions are going to be radically different than your art questions or your programming questions. But no, it's good. I mean, I was glad to see that there are more and more spaces from sites I respect going and allowing both people who have a lot of experience in this field and people who want to get into it, because even this last week, right, I was at Austin GDC, and one of the things I was talking about at Austin is, because Austin is a writers' conference, how you begin in the games field as a writer, right? And all the time I get questions through extra credits about, hey, how do I get my start in games? What should I learn at the outset, right? And it's good that there's a place for that.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, it's really specific to the topic. It's not that you want to be a programmer; it's that you want to be a game developer, and that's a bigger set of activities than just writing code. And again, we are pretty strict about that on Stack Overflow. I mean, you can't ask questions that aren't pretty hardcore programming questions. But on game dev, it's much more relaxed because of the nature of the community. Now, another thing that I saw on the episode on easy games was the focus on the tutorial, and I love tutorials. Another thing, like just in terms of resisting some of the things the community thinks they want, they tell us what you guys need is a video tutorial explaining how to do things the Stack Exchange way, because it is true that the Stack Exchange way is a little bit different than what people are used to, because there are rules. There's a lot of resistance to the idea that I can't just type into a box and press enter and have anything I want go up on your site. It's a surprising amount of resistance from certain people. But why are the rules there and what are they for? And I always resisted this because I was like, well, who's going to watch a video about the site? And hearing you talk about, okay, this idea that, a game isn't necessarily easy, it just needs a set of tutorials that sort of ramp you up and give you options to do a bunch of different things and solve problems in different ways, was this idea that instead of watching a video, you step in and do the stuff on the site, and the site sort of guides you through it. It's like the first level, in the game. Like in Alien versus Predator, the first thing you do is you look around. It's like, can you move the mouse? Can you move forward? Can you pick up something off the ground? Really, really basic stuff. And that was sort of my mentality of we don't want to have a video explaining how to do this stuff. We want the site itself to walk you through, as a new user, how you actually do these things. And that's a very gaming-centric way to look at the world, but also I think a very powerful way. Who really wants to read documentation for anything, ever, right? Wouldn't you rather just do it? I wish more products could be gamified in that way.
I think we are learning that this applies across the board. I have seen more and more discussions in the pedagogical space and school space talking about the same methodology for approaching learning, right? Rather than front load all of the instruction and this reading of documentation, as you so well put it, trying to take granular steps that you can really experience and work through each of these things, because we all have found that a person learns more from coming to a conclusion themselves, from doing a thing themselves, than simply from being told it, right? So, I mean, it's good. It does actually expand past just games and tutorials.
Right, and that's why, just out of hand, I would kind of, I mean, in a nice way, because they were offering to create video tutorials for us. Now, I'm not going to slight that offer, but it's kind of going in the wrong direction. In that kind of stuff should be built in as a tutorial to the actual website. Getting started should be really easy, and it should sort of walk you through what you need to do to get started. And I think a lot of games, like, and I hadn't really thought about this until I listened to the episode. I do actually judge games partly based on the quality of how their tutorial. Like, the first level is always a tutorial, right? Kind of. It's like, how good is the tutorial? Is it fun? Does it make you feel awesome? Like, you used the example of God of War. At the end of God of War, you feel awesome, like you've killed this Hydra thing. Even though it's really a tutorial, but it doesn't say, this is a tutorial, you shall now do these simple things. It just says, go be awesome, right? In a very constrained way. And then it sort of unlocks things as you go on, and it gets more and more complicated, and you can do more and more things. But the way that's presented really speaks to me, and I think that's exactly... Because on Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange, you unlock abilities as you sort of get reputation. You can do more things on the site. But as a newbie, you can't even leave comments. And we get complaints about it. It's like, why can't I leave a comment? It's like, well, you haven't really earned the right to leave a comment yet, because you've got to learn how to ask questions and provide answers before we let you do this meta commentary thing. And I always have to justify that constantly. But that's one of the reasons we're trying to constrain you and say, look, this is the core activity of a Q&A site, is asking questions and providing answers. Until you've shown us that you can do that, we're not going to let you do the meta commentary thing of sort of leaving comments. Now, there is a special exception for your own posts, because you have to be able to reply to others. But I mean just like random comments on other people's questions and answers. So that's, to me, like a tutorial level. It's like we're constraining your activities to teach you the basics so you don't get overwhelmed by choice, for one thing.
And I mean, it's a remarkable problem. This overwhelming by choice is actually a really interesting thing. I've been digging into it recently because it's something that we encounter a lot in games, right? Because we always talk about meaningful choice in games and the point at which a person shuts down and puts down an experience because of too much choice. And I'm always a believer in choice, but I was reading an article recently, I believe it was about Israeli judges, and it was this fascinating piece. They did this study where they were trying to figure out what helps determine whether or not a person gets bail, right?
Parole. It was worse than that. It was parole committees.
Ah, there it is.
Yeah.
You got it. You give it this story. You do it.
They just discovered that based on when the parole hearing happened during the day, the earlier in the morning the parole hearing was held, the more likely the prisoner.
After a break, right after lunch was just as good.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like a ridiculous 10-to-1 difference between your probability of getting parole based on the time of day that the parole hearing was held.
And for everybody out there in podcast land, it's because this parole board had been forced to make very high-level decisions over and over again, very complicated decisions throughout the day. And
well, I guess that's the psychological theory, was that they were just tired of making so many damn decisions, and they started getting sloppy and just saying, "Oh, never mind, you stay in jail."
Well, it's not even sloppy, right? It's safe. Because nobody gets blamed for not giving parole, right? But if you give a guy parole and he flees the country or kills some people or something like that, as a parole board, you're sort of responsible for that, right? And so instead of making a decision, they take the safe decision, which becomes the default decision, right? And so we stop making decisions at that point. And so, I mean, I agree, whether it be overwhelming with choice in just front-loading this mammoth block of options or confronting people with choice after choice that is strenuous, where you do have to, like anything else, I don't know if you guys saw the episode on the sort of engagement curve, but you do have to modulate that, right? And using systems like gamification is a great way to really do that, to modulate your users' experience so they don't throw themselves at these things. Then again, I believe the point of gamification is to get to the point where you don't need the gamification, that at some point people are doing it inherently for the activity itself rather than for the arbitrary reward system behind that activity.
Well, This came up as a question actually, and I think to me it's the scaffolding that you build the building around, but it's just the scaffolding. You can build any kind of building you want around it, and I think after a while you stop noticing. It's like you just live in the building. You're like, okay, well this is the building. I don't really care about the scaffolding. I don't need the scaffolding. I just know that it's there, and it's just an architectural conceit to sort of get things done, and I think this boils down to is the core activity sort of rewarding in the mastering sense? Like, are you accomplishing something? And I think in the case of the Stack Exchange, I think people realize that we're creating these reusable artifacts on the internet that are useful not just to us, but to other people that will find them. Like I do this all the time on Superuser, which is our site for computer enthusiasts. Is like I'll have a problem, and I just go out of my way to make sure it's documented on Superuser, so that A, I can find it later, and B, other people can find it. And it's like little, Joel, this is the first time I've gotten that Wikipedia sense, because Joel, one of our influences is also Wikipedia, that you go to some random forum thread, it's from 5 years ago, and it's impossibly out of date, right? But it has some nugget of information buried in it that's mildly useful, but like partially wrong historically, is that on Stack Exchange site, and actually even as a new user, you can suggest a change that. You say, look, this needs to be changed. Here's the way this needs to be updated. And that these are little micro, tiny units of Wikipedia page work, that this stuff actually can be updated over time. It isn't just frozen in a tombstone for the rest of time. So, and again, that's, you can suggest it, or you can unlock the ability to edit anything if you get enough reputation on the site. So that's certainly one of the major goals. One of the things I liked about the Easy Games episode was your analogy of Simon as the ultimate skill game. Like nobody can beat Simon. Simon just goes on forever. And it's the ultimate example of skill, right? Like if all you care about is infinite skill, if your complaint is that games are too easy, you should be playing Simon. I found that very amusing. I was trying to remember the last time I actually played Simon.
Well, if you played Indigo Prophecy, or you played Guitar Hero, or you played most things that use QuickTime events, you've played Simon.
That's true.
Yeah.
And they do blend them in. I guess it's a question of moderation, right? Like, I don't mind some QuickTime events, but if the whole game is a QuickTime event, like Dragon's Lair drove me crazy. Like, I remember wanting to really like that game. I was like, oh my god, this is like a cartoon. This is the coolest game I've ever seen as a kid. And then I played it and I was like, this is the stupidest game I have ever played. Because it's like, all I do is literally memorize the moves. I have no real control over what's happening. It was just totally an illusion, like in the bad way, right? Like it was the Simon game would be Dragon's Lair. And even to this day, like I have an autographed copy of Dragon's Lair. I never play it. I appreciate its place in the history, but it's like it's Simon. It's the bad kind of Simon. There's no skill. There's no flexibility. I can't change anything that's going to happen, really.
Here's the flip side, right? There's the place where we don't provide choice, right? Like you don't have any actual choice. You have actions that you take, but actions which are devoid of choice. And games are really all about providing the most meaningful choice without overwhelming with choice, and that is something that both Simon and Dragon's Lair just completely fail at.
Right. Yeah, that's certainly the bad axis of that.
It's still, but come on, Tetris doesn't give you that much.
So much more control in Tetris.
I guess you have more control, yeah.
Yeah, where you can use the blocks changes the game.
I'm just thinking about this. There's so much, games vary so much in how they provide you with the positive stimulation part of the positive stimulation experience, whether it's by feeling like you're acquiring a skill, or in the case of Tetris, it's sort of like keeping things clean and preventing the invaders from invading, or from Stack Exchange, where it's seeing somebody answering your question or voting up something that you wrote.
We should talk about OCD, like the ability to clean things. Like Asteroids is an OCD game, because all you do is you're cleaning the screen of the asteroids, right? You're like, oh my god, that feels really good. I just clean the screen. There's no more asteroids. It's all nice and clean. It's a nice big black expanse, just my ship.
And here they come again.
Yeah, Tetris is kind of like that too. But in a sense, like with Stack Exchange, we are cleaning. It's like I could go to a web page that I hate to find the information that I need, or I could go to this nice, clean, cultured place where I can use my OCD to present the information exactly the way I want to.
I think
imagine if the internet was editable. That's kind of the vision that I have. Like everywhere I go, I can edit everything. That would be awesome, right? And ideally delete stuff too. But I'll just ask for editing for now. A lot of power.
Yeah, let's ask a question from the audience. James, have you played One Chance, and what do you think of that kind of choice in a video game?
So One Chance to me was fascinating. For anybody out in the podcast verse that hasn't played One Chance, it's a Flash game, so you can probably stop listening to us and go check it out. But it's got an interesting mechanic insofar as it essentially leaves a cookie that prevents you from playing the game again. So you get exactly one chance to play through this game and make a series of choices. I think the high-level concept on it, this meta-concept of a game that has only one playthrough is sort of fantastic. Unfortunately, the actual execution in that particular case, was lacking. I mean, it's a good game, but it's very limited, and it shows some of the limitations of that design. I've always been interested in a game that is. I've always been interested in our ability to now, with microtransactions, go back to the arcade model and do something where I pay 25 cents or $1 or something like that to get a singular playthrough that's semi-unique, right? So you give me a starting code or something of that nature, which we can use as a random seed for some information about my character and its place in this world. And then you have a set of dynamic rules for this world that I can experience through the lens of this character once. And then if I want to play again, if I want to pay again, I can play and totally re-roll a different experience.
A different character.
Yeah. But One Chance is certainly worth the seeing. It'll take you like 2 minutes. I think that if you're into sort of the bleeding edge of game design, it's certainly an interesting concept.
It sounds like something that comes out of like ITP or one of those academic programs.
Yeah, it's very similar to that. It's God, what was that? Agrippa. That's it. If any of you guys know the William Gibson book Agrippa, it's the same concept. I thought it was fascinating. Like we've done it in literature, we've done it in theater, and now to be able to do it in games.
Here's another question. Tom McDonald asks, have you ever completed QWOP? I don't know what that is. QWOP is a running Flash game.
No. The short answer is no. I have not. To be totally honest, a lot of games at this point, because there are so many games that come out, as a designer, it's my job to assess the systems and mechanics in as many as I possibly can. And so I pick up a lot of games and will play numerous games for everything from 10 minutes to 2 hours, to the point where they really expose all their systems and mechanics and then put them down.
Right.
It's very rare that I actually get to play games all the way through as a player, although that is still my recreation when I get to.
We have one of the things I wanted to talk about is there's sort of a, I guess there's white hat, gray hat, and black hat gamification to some extent.
Oh, yes, and I have a lead-in. I'll let you continue.
Okay.
The Monopoly game at McDonald's. You mentioned that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cover that, because
And
I
it's
thought that was
back
a really nice.
on.
And it's evil because take it away.
It makes you eat French fries.
Yeah, it basically aside from the fact that the whole thing was rigged for the first several years by the people who were actually doing the gamification, the reason that the Monopoly game, for anybody who doesn't know how the Monopoly game at McDonald's works, you basically get a little Monopoly board, and every time that you buy certain objects, you get a game token, which is either you win certain specific food or other prizes, or it's a piece that goes on this board, and when you make a Monopoly, when you get the whole set of any individual group of properties, I'm assuming that you all know Monopoly, then you win certain prizes. The main reason that this is black hat gamification is because over the years, McDonald's has become very aware that they can use this Monopoly game to drive purchasing habits of consumers. And so they only put those pieces on the most profitable items for them. At this point, just soda and French fries.
Anything with corn syrup.
Exactly. Anything that's mostly.
But there's also I remember hearing a talk. I won't name names by somebody who is deeply involved in the Zynga about all the kind of the techniques that are used to kind of drive addiction of the Farmville type games and drive certain behavior. With a lot of little details, like people will go crazy to try to get 1 million points. So you need a system where you can reach 1 million points within, I think they said 4 months or something. And I was just sort of imagining that, there's a large group of people that are sitting there at the 700,000 point level playing this game just to get to 1 million. And this, it sort of reminded me of seeing people play the 5-cent slot machines in Winnemucca, Nevada, not even Las Vegas, right? But like in a gas station in Winnemucca. And they have a whole bunch of quarters. And every once in a while, they shove a quarter into the slot machine and like 4 quarters come out or a bunch of quarters come out. And then they look sad. And you just realize that their goal in life is to just get rid of the damn quarters. And every time the slot machine feeds them more quarters, they know that they got another half hour of shoveling quarters into this damn machine. So there's something like deeply wrong there.
So it's one of the things I talk about a lot when I talk to educators, because this is actually a really important piece of gamification. And I actually did some work at Zynga. I did. Our company, my Rainmaker Games, was actually contracted by Zynga to do some narrative work for them at one point. So I can't really talk about the stuff that they do. But the danger of gamification, and everyone who does gamification realizes this, that we can definitively condition a human being to take specific actions, right? To take what would normally be considered voluntary actions, such as continuing to play a slot machine or continuing to play Farmville. But you can't. A conditioned action isn't an action that anyone is necessarily going to get anything from. If you talk to a lot of the players who play Skinnerbox social games or even some MMOs, after a period of time, they're even aware that they're not having any fun. They're not actually enjoying this experience. They are compelled to continue to do this experience, but a compelled experience isn't an experience that you're going to get anything from. So all the people who say that we can use this Skinnerbox gamification to gamify education, I think they're missing this major component of how Skinner's research worked, because you can't actually force someone to. You can get them to do an action. You can't get them to get anything from that action. And so in education, of course, the whole point is not to continue to get them to do their action, to continue to write out their math problems or whatever, but rather to learn. And that's an action that you cannot do strictly through Skinnerbox techniques.
Yeah, although actually the Khan Academy is trying.
Khan Academy is fascinating to me. Yeah. I have some objections to the Khan Academy, not in its specific, and I know this is going to get me into a huge amount of trouble, because there are lots of people who are big fans of the Khan Academy, and frankly, I am too, but I've seen lots of people when going to these educational summits, I've met lots of people who in some ways believe the Khan Academy is the future, and that the Khan Academy can help us drastically reduce the number of teachers we need. And to me, here's the danger, because I think that the Khan Academy is a wonderful and fantastic supplement, and a good way to sort of incentivize a person to go back and refresh themselves or build up their muscles in these areas. I mean, the other day I had to do some calculus, and I was like, trying to remember, and actually went to the Khan Academy.
You had to do calculus? You might be the first person in the world that has ever said those words to me.
This may be. See, this is me standing on the designer side of the fence, right?
Trig, I would understand.
But the danger in the Khan Academy is I do see a lot of people saying that for the American education system this is the way to reduce our budget, right? We're not going to have to pay for education because we're just going to have people record a bunch of videos and have these gamified websites that people can go into and plug in their information. And to me, I believe this to be completely backwards, right?
Yeah,
I believe that's
credit to the Khan Academy. That's not what they believe. I mean, they just believe this gives the teacher in the classroom more time to give individual attention to students instead of, doing the monotonous part of repeating the lectures. That can be done kind of automatically as the homework, and then in the classroom time, students can do their problems with sort of a teacher wandering around looking over their shoulder and providing individual help. I mean, that's their theory, but they've also got this website that uses very, very lightweight game mechanics to kind of encourage you to learn more subjects and to make progress through a curriculum. And it does appear to be motivating people on that site. I mean, it does appear to be motivating students to learn more things and to make progress. I don't know if it's the right kind of motivation, though.
Well, I mean, overall, I think it's good. I mean, it's this whole debate of intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, right? And really, to learn, you need intrinsic motivation. And if
which
that's
you
what
actually
people
had intrinsic motivation to learn calculus. You might be the first person, like I say, in the history of the entire world.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious what problem you had that calculus was the answer to your problem. I have just never had that happen to me.
You have never had a problem where your calculus has to come up. It's complicated. I actually learned my calculus. My education was very strange, and I actually took classics as my bachelor, right? And so we worked through. I worked through mathematics starting in Euclid and literally worked my way up. So I learned my calculus from the Principia, from the Newton, right? And not as efficient. To me, much more effective in actually teaching it to me, but not as efficient as some of the ways we've got to teach it today. Although on the other hand, it taught me a lot of the background information that really gave me a intrinsic interest in the subject in a way that I had never had it when presented in a textbook in high school. And so I don't.
Well, sure, that's the way you're supposed to learn. You're supposed to have problems to which learning something is the answer. I mean, that's how Stack Exchange works. You come to us with a problem, you write up your problem, you tried to solve it, right? You put in the effort. That's something we're trying to get stricter about. Don't just, give me the answer. That's the worst kind of Stack Exchange question. And then you explain, okay, I tried this, I don't understand what's happening. I need to understand, how do I solve my problem? Mm-hmm. And then the answer to your problem would have been, hey, learn some calculus, right? And that you should want to do that because you have a problem, right? Capital P problem that you're trying to solve.
Well, that's
why. Let me go into gamifying education. I watched that episode, and Joel, I thought this was really interesting. One of the first points he made, which I totally agree with, is the grading system is wrong, right off the bat, because you start at A+, and everything you do knocks you down from that, which is exactly backwards. I totally agree with this.
F.
Right.
I don't know.
And what James was saying, what they should do, and I totally agree with this, is you should start. Everybody starts off at 1. Well, we don't start. By the way, James, we don't start people off at 0. That's kind of a scary place to start people. We start people off at 1, which is friendlier,
nice.
And you go up from 1. Okay, and then every time you do something you're supposed to do, you get points, Joel. And Joel has lectured me before about the value of a number that's constantly increasing
Monotonically.
Yeah, monotonically. And this is pretty much that argument. It's like every time you do an assignment, every time you finish a report, you get points for it.
Well,
but there was some more subtlety to it than that. And it was also like you have to incentivize the class in helping each other, not just getting their own points up, but getting each other's points up. And you had this term, high sense of agency. Can you elaborate on that? I couldn't fully understand what you were getting at with that when you said high sense of agency.
Agency, like we were talking about earlier, it's so when we were talking about choice, Tetris came up, and someone said, in Tetris, there's not many choices. This is because of the semantic way we tend to look at the word choice, right? This is why I use agency a lot more. You have a lot of control over your existence within the universe of Tetris, right? And so, and how you exercise that control is actually through a series of choices, but that's not how we think about choices in our day-to-day life. A high sense of agency is that same idea, the sense of having control over my own existence, right?
And the world around you as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And especially I did I did some semi-formal stints teaching in, let's say, lower income, not the best areas, specifically Oakland. And I encountered a lot of kids there who didn't have a sense of agency. They would shuffle from one day to the next, but didn't even have the concept of things like long-term planning, because they just didn't feel like they had any control over their existence. They didn't feel like they had choice, that life was something that happened to them, rather than that they pursued life, right?
And what you're describing is helplessness, and that sense of helplessness leads to depression. Because if you can't influence the world, why bother? And then you end up not even trying, and when you're not even trying, even worse things happen to you. You get into a kind of vicious cycle of helplessness leading to depression, leading to...
So, James, I totally agree with that interpretation. Is that correct, James? And also, like, how would games help with that? I was unclear about that.
So I'll give that just a second. I think the helplessness point is a really good one, because I made the reference to it in terms of the overarching lack of agency in one's life. But a lot of times in my encounters with educators, they run into this all the time in specific subjects. A kid will start at the beginning, not get something, fall behind a little bit, and then feel like they don't have control or the option to catch up, and so then sort of put up their hands and give up. And once they lose that sense of agency, there's essentially nothing the teacher can do, or at least it becomes a monumentally, orders of magnitude more difficult problem to get that student back and able and on track, right? And so this is why agency is really important. Where games can help is games are a time compression system, right? We have all lived 10,000 different lives in the course of our playing of games. And those lives, each of them has occurred in the space of a few seconds if you're playing Super Meat Boy, or maybe 60 hours if you're playing something like Dragon Age.
I've certainly killed that many birds in Angry Birds.
There you go. Games are this great system to show that you can approach a problem, and your approach to that problem, your specific choices when facing that thing, influence the outcome, right? Because the time between choice, between decision and outcome is so compressed. You get it in usually a matter of minutes or seconds, rather than in life where sometimes I can't see the direct correlation between my choices and the outcome. I mean, programming is another great way to show rapidly the direct impact of what I did and what occurred, right?
Yeah. This is actually, we have here a paradox, actually, because there's the whole Martin Seligman theory of learned helplessness, which I'm a big believer in that theory, actually, and it says that you start to learn that you have a lack of agency in the world, and that creates that vicious cycle of helplessness, which makes you depressed and unhappy. And Martin Seligman originally basically offered a proposal or a treatment for that, which was to do things in which you exert agency over the world around you. You do things that actually do have an impact, and a game seems like at its best it would have the ability to do it. It doesn't have to be a game. It could be a game where you literally you win, or you lose once and then you win, or you get a higher and a higher score, and you feel like you do have the ability kind of to exert agency and to influence the world, and that may kind of get you out of the mindset of helplessness and shuffling around, looking at your shoes and thinking that nothing you do ever matters. A game could actually get you out of that mode, but then again, you can go kind of too far and become so addicted to the feeling of pleasurable agency in the games that you refuse to face the real world, which is kind of the...
Ooh, and let me bring up another great point. This is actually from the gamification one, was that the point you brought up was that our entertainment options have become so amazingly good that they have radically outstripped like sort of what's available from work and what's available from learning. Like the education system really isn't changing at all, and the work system is changing like very, very
It's
slowly.
hard to get a job as a sniper these days. There's not that many jobs.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you get this thrill from these, these state-of-the-art entertainment. I mean, you can go to amusement parks and ride a roller coaster that how many millions of dollars was built in constructing this thing? It's like, how do you replicate that feling in like work? How do you replicate that feeling at school? I thought that was a really interesting way to look at this. I had never thought of it that way.
I just had a great debate at Austin with a guy over this very point. To me, that is some of the humanitarian, one of the large humanitarian goals of the next century. I believe that we have this 19th century view that everything of worth has to be bought with toil and strife, with suffering, right? We bring that into our schooling. We bring that into a lot of our vocation. But that's not a 21st century mindset. We have learned enough about entertainment through throwing hundreds of billions of dollars of it with film and television and roller coasters, casinos, all these things. We've learned how to entertain. We've learned how to keep a human being, most importantly, engaged. And we can bring that engagement to a wide swath of topics, right? And to me, I talk to people all the time who work a job that they do not enjoy, and then they come home and they watch some TV and they fall asleep because they feel so drained, soul-numbed by this 8 hours of activity that they feel more crushed by it than a lot of people I know who are working 12, 14-hour days at something that they're really passionate about. And I think that's actually a drain on our society as a whole. And I think that there's a mammoth project out there to remove this suffering and tedium, both physical and mental, from a lot of the activities that are the base activities without which our society can't function, but we currently have as soul-draining jobs that are built on tedium.
So what are we supposed to do? Like have a game system for the dishwashers in the restaurant doing the washing pots? Where they
I think, Joel, I would characterize it as like when you go to Google, it's like, and remember when we went to Facebook, it was very alive. Like people were there. There was this sense of urgency and that things were happening and that it was kind of hip and happening, right, at Facebook. And then you go to Google and it's like, well, look, it looks fun, right? Like they have all these cubicles with all this crazy stuff. They have a ball pit. They have they're clearly like not afraid to enjoy themselves. And I think the worst places you go are where you go there and it's just like, Joe versus the volcano with the fluorescent lights that are draining your life away, in the dim basement. Mm-hmm. Like, are you afraid to have fun? Are you afraid to have fun? And I've had this experience in my previous jobs where, like, I was always the guy that was trying to bring the fun, like, in. I was like, I'm going to have fun. I'm going to be here 8 hours a day. I don't care if you guys are having fun. Screw it. I'm going to have fun, right? Like, that was kind of, like, one of my goals. I was that guy at a lot of places. And I think maybe having that come down from the top is even better.
I mean, it is threefold, right? Like, it is environmental, like you discussed with not for cost reasons, just due to a long-standing tradition. We create office environments that are not actually conducive to work, especially not creative work. And it was funny, I was thinking about the other day, I was driving down through Austin and someone said the sentence, totally unironically, that is either a dorm or a prison, when discussing what a building was.
Right.
That right there should never occur, right? And then you've got this mindset shift where you have this old idea that something can't be good unless I bought it with pain, right?
Right. It has to be hard. It has to be painful. You can't be having fun, otherwise you're not doing real work.
Protestant
right?
work ethic on which this country was built.
Well, yes. And I think
you want to have fun, go to Greece and lie around the beach and go bankrupt as a country.
That's right. That's for lazy. Fun is for lazy people, Joel.
That's right.
And so I think we have to
just print some more money.
And then lastly, I mean, I do think that, be it gamifying, I personally don't think that there's any topic that you can't create games for. I don't think they're the right answer for everything. But if it's truly tedious work, like, I mean,
dishwashing.
Sure, dishwashing or
pot scrubbing.
Peeling
of hard-boiled eggs. I did a couple of years of that in the Israeli army.
Let me go back to the education example, because you had a specific example that I thought was really good on education. about the ARG, which is alternate reality games, which to me is a really obscure terminology, and I don't think that's even remotely close to the mainstream. But like the I Love Bees thing, do you know about that, Joel? Like the Halo. I actually kind of hate these things, to be perfectly honest with you, James. Like I think these are useless wastes of time. But that struck me as a lot of work. Like rather than coming up with a lesson plan, Joel, you would come up with sort of a game that was like kids had to sort of figure out like what they were trying to learn about. And that struck me as really, really hard. But James, then you had another example which I thought was much, much better, which is let's play the 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon game, where I come up with 2 topics that are like you had monarch butterflies and like the Tang
Second
Dynasty.
Kahara,
Yeah, something I can't remember. And students have to find a path from A to B.
Yeah.
And they can take their own path, right? You've given them agency of like, okay, you can find your own path from monarch butterflies to this dynasty. On Wikipedia, and along the way you'll probably learn something. And you had brought up this idea of tangential learning, of when you play like the movie 300 introduced people to history to some degree, right? And granted, it was a movie about history, so it's kind of cheating in that sense. But it was really fascinating thing, like how can you work in tangential learning? And I thought tangential learning was kind of what you were talking about with, hey students, make me a path from A to B on Wikipedia and explain how you got there. I thought that was a really good example of sort of a low friction ARG, right?
Well, I tend to like it. Sort of reminds me of what we tell new programmers on any programming team, which is before you ask a question about the code, see if you can figure it out yourself, even if that's really, really inefficient. Because all that time that you think of being inefficient, where you're just desperately hacking around the source code trying to find the answer to something that everybody else knows already, you're learning a bunch of stuff that you just trip over that doesn't solve your problem that moment, but will help you learn about the source code for later. So it's kind of the way you're going to learn the code base of any new code project, is if you basically just kind of struggle trying to find the answer to the simplest problems that you're having instead of just asking somebody.
And this concept of accidental learning, I think, is really powerful. And in Steve Jobs passing away, one of the many, many recollections he had was about the value of just sort of idle time, where you're sort of just following, wherever your fancy leads you. Like that's sort of the definition of figuring out what it is that you actually like. And that's something people need to be empowered to do. It can't be just like follow the workbook, work through lessons 1 through 20. This is your agency thing that you were talking about, I think, James. Like letting them have control over some of the things that they're learning, even if it's not really on the lesson plan. If it's interesting to them, they're getting something out of it. Why not? Isn't that agency?
Go ahead.
In general, we underutilize the power of human curiosity, right? We will self-educate. I give this sometimes in talks of when I'm talking especially to young gamers, I'm like, well, a lot of us know hundreds of Pokemon, right? But those aren't things that anybody taught you. Those aren't things that somebody sat you down in a classroom and gave you a worksheet on. Nobody gave you a lecture on those things, or the characters from Star Wars, or the people on your favorite baseball team, right? But these are things that you learn yourself under your own power because you were interested, right? Because you were curious about them. And I'm sure for you guys, everybody's encountered this in their life where they highly self-educate about things that you're just curious about, that you're interested, that something that it touches you in some way, usually because it's not presented in a way that's unappealing to you, right? It's why we do it more with television and sports than we do with academic subjects.
Yeah.
And when you said life embraces the gamer mindset, and your example was you played a lot of EverQuest, and a lot of the skills that made you good at EverQuest, like figuring things out, like min-maxing. Like min-maxing totally applies to the things you do in life. Like a lot of the really, really anal gamers that I know are doing really well in life because they're min-maxing their careers.
And I mean, to me, right, I believe there's a Tao to everything, and that if you really follow it, that if you can envision certain things as a life path, they will help you enable the life that you want. To me, where I had put my more than 10,000 hours in was clearly gaming, and I just took the step back and looked at the skills that provided, and I mean, so far in my life, they've been invaluable, right? The same approach, this, and part of it is actually some of the things that games teach on a more abstract level. I am the hero in my own story, right? there isn't really anything that I default to as unachievable, right? There's nothing that I've said, oh, that's impossible, so I'm not going to try. Because games always teach you that, right?
You're
games
young.
always teach you can win.
When you're my age, you give up on everything right away.
It does seem more efficient.
I'm about to give up on. We're going kind of long here, so I want to thank James Portnow. He's the co-creator of Extra Credits. If you're just tuning in, that doesn't really happen in a podcast. Everybody listens from the beginning. Nobody's just tuning in. So why would I say that anyway? We could find you on Penny Arcade TV. We'll have links and stuff on the show notes. You're also James Portnow, Portnow on the Twitter, and Extra Credits with a Z, also on
the Twitters.
The Twitters.
Everybody, seriously, go watch a lot of those Extra Credits episodes. They're really, really good.
Yeah, and
really
and
interesting stuff.
To those of you that are listening to this to our normal podcast audience, the 14 people that normally listen to this podcast, as opposed to the 48 million people that will tune in, James, to hear you. What Extra Credits is a bunch of really awesome little videos about basically how games are designed and built and how they work and all that kind of behind the scenes stuff about games. Is that a good characterization?
Yeah, no, that's great.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank you guys. This has been awesome, and I love Stack Exchange, so this has been fun.
Cool. Thanks for being on. Before we go away, actually, is David still here? David is sitting in for Jeff while Jeff is on vacation doing Zscuba. Any news of the Stack Exchange? Because that's what we usually do in the podcast. We give the news of Stack Exchange. Any recent rolled out things we want to tell the people about?
Nothing that's gone out yet.
See, Jeff is gone for 1 week and nobody does any work.
Everything wait, no. We have a mascot now.
That's true. That's on the blog.
Excuse me, that was not
That is
David.
the most important thing that we have to mention.
Hey, excuse me, I would actually like to point out that our thesis was entirely correct, and everyone's like, oh, no, it's not even worthwhile.
Yeah, the mascot. It seems
literally
like a dumb idea.
Hundreds of people came up to the mascot and posed for pictures with it when they were walking around Comic-Con with it.
They're all Stack Exchange users now, all of them.
Actually,
every man, woman, and child.
No, none of them knew what it was. Some
of them are.
That was the point. They're like, hey, I want to take a picture with this mascot and then tell me what it is.
Yeah, and then
I wasn't involved in this decision, but I do want to point out that I would have totally supported it. Had I known this was happening, I would have been totally in favor of it.
Well, now you know. We're sending it to a 10K race on Saturday as well to promote fitness.
10,000 points on Stack
I love
Exchange?
that I joked about this because when we did the information about like supporting community conferences, I joked that and as a condition for us sponsoring you to go on the speaking gig, you have to dress up as the Stack Exchange mascot. I had actually joked about that, but now we can make that an actual requirement. Joel.
We have one. That can be a requirement.
You will have to wear the actual Stack Exchange mascot outfit while giving your talk. Imagine how awesome that would be.
Our in-house mascot, who will remain nameless because it's like in high school and you don't actually get to know who the mascot is,
right,
is very protective of the mascot costume and does not want anything bad to happen.
Yes, well, that's good. That's good.
Okay, so this has been episode 23 of the Stack Exchange Podcast. Anything at last minute?
Can you end it in French again?
No, I told you. I used up every word of French that I know.
I do have one other thing. I'll be speaking at ORDEV.
ORDEV in Malmö again, in Sweden?
Yeah, in Sweden.
Yes.
Which is apparently the premier developers conference in Europe focused on the whole software development process.
Well, at least in the Aura region, which is basically Copenhagen and Malmö.
Right.
When is this?
It's a good
keynoting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I keynoted that once. It was freezing. Oh my god, it was so cold. My eyes froze. But here's what I recommend, Jeff. There's a really cool building in that you got to see in Malmö. It's like a twisty building.
You know what?
You just got to see it. It's like a building that's been twisted.
It's probably not great. You probably should have someone go with you. I nominate Punyan.
Punyan.
Yeah,
you should probably take Punyan with you.
Vacation from his Hawaii.
Yes, make him come back from Hawaii to go to Sweden with you.
I had not considered this. I'll have to give this some thought. I had not considered the Punyan option.
Possibility. I'll go with you. That's okay. You don't need Punyan.
Plus, if something breaks, you can just blame it on him.
That's right. I was just going to go by myself.
Or
is it Mark going with you? Mark Gravel?
Mark will be there. We're not traveling together.
Oh, wow.
He actually will be helping me with one of my sessions, which is very, very helpful. So yeah, you can see Mark Ravel, you can see me. You'll get plenty of Stack Exchange type information.
So yeah, it's easy to fly to Malmö from Malmö or Copenhagen. You just go to Copenhagen Airport because it's the same distance as Copenhagen.
Yeah, and Mark's
November 7th through 11th.
Mark's talk actually Mark's talk sounds actually really interesting. He's going to be talking about scaling Stack Overflow and how we handle all that traffic. Actually,
we should send our engineers to that too.
Yeah. Well, David, there's going to be 2 talks like that because I was going to give a talk similar to that. So we're just basically going to do 2 of those. Mark will do. We'll do them together, basically.
You can you can do it in Swedish.
Or French.
Okay.
Or British.
Or British, yes, British English. That's nice. All our colors will have a U in them.
Producer Alex, any announcements we want to make this week? It's really been kind of quiet. We have things are going kind of quiet this week because we have the entire community team will be arriving pretty much tonight.
I think
they're not here.
Several
already.
of them are already here.
Yeah, the whole community team, which these are people that normally work from home at their farms throughout the Midwest, are going to be arriving in New York City. Sort of like an episode of Green Acres, that very special episode of Green Acres, for a summit with Chaos. It's the community Chaos
the
Summit.
only exciting thing I can give is the fact that we now have our own URL shortener. So
S.tk. S.tk. What should we do with that?
All the obvious ones are in there. So, live chat, live stream, blog, all of the sites have their own. But there's also some hidden...
Can I get S.tk/Joel?
Yeah, just tell me where you want it to go.
To my user page.
Okay, yeah. Just... Which user page? Network, Stack Overflow. There's like 27 user pages.
Your careers profile.
Yeah. Let's do the careers profile.
But there's also some hidden Easter eggs in there. So play around with it. See if you can find what the hidden.
What am I supposed to type every dictionary word into this?
Think about it. It's all recurring memes. It's all recurring memes.
Oh, really? Okay, wait.
Although several of them are from inside the office only.
/blocked at the database level.
Punyan.
No. S.tk/Punyan. Okay, that's it. This is the podcast officially over. Goodbye.
Bye, everybody.